Literally every single group that has even 6 degrees of separation to do with farmers is supporting this legislation, but the Farm Bureau. So is it that A, he really wanted a bill that only supported his specific use case, or B, he was full of shit the entire fucking time?
Oh.
My guess.
Where's that New Yorker?
Surprise, not a surprise.
Like my point is, when you say that people chose this, if people choose a product from a company because they make the best product, and they keep choosing it to the point where everybody else goes out of it, everybody else is no longer an option or out of business, and then you're one of the only ones left. You have like 95% of everybody using you. You have the market share. You have all this money because you were able to get to the particular point that you're at as a result of having so many people buy your product, and then on a dime you just switch. Like, the way you're phrasing it, I mean, I can understand the moral and ethical argument if you're making that as an anarcho-capitalist completely, even if I didn't 100% agree with it. But I can't agree with what you're saying, which is users chose this. They chose to buy from this company, but that doesn't mean that once that company flips on a dime to deciding that we want to abuse consumers, that consumers chose to get abused. They chose to buy what was the best at the time. They can't choose the way a company is going to change into the future. Once that company is the only company left that makes a viable product for what it is they want to do, you're kind of screwed at that point.
Right.
I don't disagree about another company that should come along and actually make something that doesn't do this. What I'm disagreeing with is when you say the consumer chose this. Like,
Right, yeah,
when they bought this product in 1999 and bought into it, they bought into the idea that, by the way, by buying this product, you are supporting a company that will put other companies into lower market share to out of business. And as a result of doing it, once they reach that point, they will serialize their products to the point where you can't fix it yourself. Like,
Yes.
that was not written in the contract. That was not in the manual. That was not in the advertisement. That was not said at the dealer. Like, they didn't make that choice. You can say that I believe that the government should have no say whatsoever and that it should be a purely contractual. Like, again, I can understand the anarcho-capitalist argument to it, even if I don't necessarily agree to it. I just can't agree with, like, when you say they chose it. Like, that's just bull.
Let me ask you a question.
None of these products are advertised this way. No cell phone, no computer. None of these products are advertised saying, by the way, the moment that we become this dominant force, we will take away your freedom to do what you want with what you own. Just know that when you buy it. Because if they did, nobody would be buying it.
Who's actually coming to him and a Farm Bureau lobbyist? Uh-oh.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a lovely day. And a point that I've been bringing up in more and more videos over the past year is that the Farm Bureau that claims to represent and advocate for farmers doesn't seem to do so. Right to repair was voted on 176-1 within constituents of the Farm Bureau. In spite of that, legislation continues to get slow walked. You have politicians that are supported by the Farm Bureau that vote against right to repair. You have VPs of the Farm Bureau leave the Farm Bureau to go work for the Equipment Dealers Association and then make cheeky comments to members of the Farm Bureau that see this as a betrayal. But the biggest one was this email that I received on December 14th, 2021 from somebody who worked from the Farm Bureau. This was an email sent between my lobbyist, who I had hired to try to get right to repair passed in a state, and a gentleman from the Farm Bureau. It's still a tough issue to address. Our problem isn't really a non-ability to repair our own equipment, but more a lack of service providers in key times of the year. Most farmers don't have or care to have the knowledge of the equipment to repair their own equipment, so it's more of a service provider issue. I don't think the bills you guys are going with will address our issues, so we won't be going in that direction this session. We're still looking at several options, but I'm not sure a legislative fix is the answer. So to keep your bill clean, I would recommend removing farm equipment from the bill. If not, I'll probably have to ask for an amendment to the bill to remove them, and that will make it super difficult to keep the bill moving. I will translate the way I read this, the way I see what he's saying. Hi, we don't actually support farmers' right to repair. I'm going to say something that's so ridiculously outlandish that just lets you know which side I'm on without actually saying the quiet part out loud by saying that farmers don't care to fix their own stuff. If you don't remove farm equipment from the bill, I will contact the legislators directly with the full authority and weight of the Farm Bureau, which will undermine your authority. So if you don't remove farm equipment from the bill, which would make my master's John Deere happy, I will tank your bill and destroy you. That's the way that reads to me. That reads as a very veiled threat. Get farm equipment off of this bill, or I will humiliate you and destroy your bill, having any chance of passing when it comes to consumer electronics, right to repair, automotive, or any.
I could even believe that farmers don't want to repair their own stuff, but they absolutely don't want to live with John Deere monopolies. Yeah, actually, the truth, I think, is halfway between what Lewis is saying and halfway between what the legislator is saying. I bet most farmers probably don't want to fix their own shit. I don't think anybody wants to fix their own shit. But what people probably want is the ability to go to like a third-party, unauthorized person to fix their shit, right? Like, I don't want to know how to replace my own fucking iPhone battery, but I don't want to have to go to a fucking Genius store to do it. I think that's like the middle ground that's probably a reasonable ask there. Farmers love fixing their own shit. Today, do they? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, in the past, maybe, like, but that was like when cars had like carburetors. I don't know how, like, I feel like a lot of the farm equipment that exists today is very, very, very technologically advanced. I don't know if an average farmer would have the tech savviness to fix a lot of the problems. But that's just a guess. I could be wrong. Maybe they do learn all that stuff. But but I do know that, in my personal opinion, the big part of right to repair isn't the idea that you can fix your own stuff. It's that I don't need to go to an officially authorized first-party store to do it. For me personally, that's my selling point, or that would be the selling point to me. That's why I'm so like in favor of it, because I think it's bullshit that you have to use authorized first-party or would it be second-party people to fix your shit. That's bullshit. Should the company still have to provide the common warranty for the rest of the product if they get a specific part repaired by a third party? I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody gives a fuck about that. I think you'd rather have campaign guide 500%. I'm not playing through 500%. I'm playing 800%. Fuck you. I don't think, fuck, I just forgot what I was saying. Oh, I don't care if I could void my warranty if I can have like third-party people working on shit, right? Like, do I want to do warranty authorized work for paying $400 to fix a screen, or do I want to pay like an Indian dude $35 to fix it just as well without the warranty? I'd rather just do like fuck the warranty. That's what I would say.
Even if I wasn't going to do a video publicly at the time or make the emails public at the time, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't speak with him. And if I didn't record the phone call. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually play that recorded phone call and walk you through the recorded phone call so you can have an idea of how this entire process works.
So I have no problem removing the agriculture sections from this bill. I had retained to try and push forward a bill here and also in about 5 or 6 other states at this point in time. My main question was regarding the back and forth that we had when you had said that sorry, I just wanted to make sure I have this exact thing in front of me. You had said it's more of a service provider issue and that most farmers don't have or care to have the knowledge of the equipment to repair their own equipment. So the main problem that I have here is I'm pretty much a person from New York City that doesn't actually farm, and the appearance of it is going to be that like the moment that I start pushing forward a bill in the state that I'm asking for agriculture to get removed from it. And so it kind of lends the appearance that I'm primarily trying to get only what I care about passed at the expense of. And what makes it difficult is that in certain other states, I believe in Nebraska, they had voted 176-1 in favor of right to repair legislatively. So there's a public perception that the Farm Bureau wants to see right to repair happen legislatively. But if the private communications are saying we don't want to have that happen, but the public communications are, it puts me in a weird spot where people are then going to say that I'm the one that doesn't want this to be there in the bill. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we still support the right to repair, and actually, in the process of there possibly being a right to repair farm equipment bill, just specifically. It's in draft form with Delegate Hornberger.
This doesn't make any sense.
True.
And we're trying to narrow it's pretty close to where we need to be. It's just the language is just a notch too vague. I think John Deere can get around way the language is. Our problem is that unlike Verizon and Dell and some of these other companies, the equipment dealers or the equipment manufacturers have, if I was playing football, they've taken us all the way to the 5-yard line, and we literally got everything we possibly could need except for one little small piece that's maybe 2 to 5% of the time that we might need for a repair as of right now. Now, as technology continues to advance and we get to autonomous tractors and all this kind of stuff, everything will be running off a computer. But the problem of it is that we are not given the right to repair or to flash or pair the computer software. And that's where the rubber meets the road for us. So we have gotten the diagnostic tools.
Well, that's literally the only hard part of the whole process, no? Wasn't the main thrust of the complaint that wasn't the main thrust of the complaint is that you're essentially locked out of the chips, you're locked out of the firmware of a lot of these machines that make it essentially impossible to change a lot of stuff in some of the tractors. It used to be a long time ago, when you're working on cars a long time ago, and you're changing like carburetor settings, you're changing the timings of your engine, you have to like, they're like nuts and bolts, and there's all this shit that you're actually physically, mechanically changing in a car in order to make shit, like in order to actually like upgrade or change or repair parts of a car. Nowadays, all of that shit is handled by like 50 different fucking ECUs, different little computer chips that are in your car. So in order to change any of it, you need access to the software. That's why today, if you want to make your car faster, people can literally plug a little thing into the OBD2 port, that little port below, and like push a couple buttons and literally flash the chip on your engine, or that, no, it's not on your engine, but flash a chip that controls a lot of the timing in your engine in order to make your car run differently. But the problem, I think, with the John Deere tractors and everything is that, like, they're saying that, like, you can't access any of that firmware. You're not allowed to. It's like copyright infringement, or you just don't have the access to it. In which case, oh, well, then you can't do any of those repairs. You're like fucked, you know?
We've got an ability to diagnose what's wrong with our tractor. We've got an ability to order our own parts. We've got an ability to put those parts in. But the only part we are left with is if that repair requires a software or requires some hardware change in one of the computers in the piece of equipment, that software pairing or that sourcing of that code is not given to the farmer or to any independent repair group. It has to be done by an authorized repair person.
Yeah, no shit. You just described the entire point of what right to repair is about, my fucking dude. What? Hey.
And they will not budge on that. And that is literally the only thing we have left. And
that is the only thing that matters. That is the only thing that matters. Or I guess maybe voiding warranties and shit, but like that's like one of the most important parts.
So the way the bill that you guys are pushing forward gets way, I mean, it's trying to fix a lot of things that we've already gotten past, and I'm trying to get to the last nuts and bolts, and so that's why that bill that bill's too complicated to fix our problem, and that's why I was trying to keep from getting in the middle of that, because it's kind of an apples and oranges issue.
I lose my mind on this
It
call.
sounds like what he's saying is not that he's against right to repair, like what he was saying in his original email. What he's saying now is that this bill doesn't go far enough. It doesn't get us exactly what we need. So let's read the House and Senate versions of this bill to try and figure out if they would have actually gotten us what we were looking for. So in the House bill, it says, for the purpose of requiring an OEM to make available documentation, updates, or information to an independent repair provider or owner of farm equipment to allow for the diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of farm equipment. And when you scroll down, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here, it says for farm equipment or parts of farm equipment manufactured by OEM on its behalf, will make available to independent repair provider or owner of the farm equipment documentation, parts, tools, inclusive of any updates for purposes of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of the farm equipment. Now, when it comes to pairing, tool includes software or any other mechanisms that provision, program, or pair apart, calibrate functionality, or perform any other function required to bring the product back to fully functional condition. There is
Jacob,
absolutely no ambiguity there in exactly what that means. This whole business of I fixed my tractor, but it won't work until the dealer comes by to plug his laptop into the tractor is solved with this bill. If we look at the Senate draft of this bill, tool includes software or other mechanisms that provision, program, pair apart, calibrate functionality, or perform any other function required to bring the product back to fully functional condition. That is clear as day to me. And the fact that they never introduced any other legislation like this gentleman said they were considering doing, the fact that he said farmers don't have an interest in fixing their own stuff, and the fact that they signed a memorandum of understanding ensuring that they will never, ever again back any sort of right to repair legislation really solidifies for me that this gentleman's problem was not that the bill that we presented wasn't strong enough. It gave the farmers exactly what they wanted. And that might just be why you were against it to begin with.
Okay, so just so because I want to make sure I don't get anything confused. So the way that bill was written, that bill would have not gotten you access to the ability to reprogram the tractor after a repair so that it would accept newly paired parts.
It was going to get us. It was going to require through law things that we've already gotten, and it wasn't, and we're not believing that bill will get us the pairing ability. We believe that that's going to get caught up in some legalese in the way that bill's.
So you would want a bill.
Not defined enough.
So you would want a bill that ensures 100% that you get access to the pairing abilities that you're looking for.
Yeah, that whether it's broke, because all of ours is broken down in farm equipment. It's the software is tied to the serial number. So if I were to get, it's kind of like a key. So if I got a key.
Does Lewis not? Lewis is a pretty tech savvy guy. He must know about this stuff, right? Is he just letting the guy talk so that he can explain his shit, or?
This key only works for my car. It doesn't work for your, even though you have the same
Great,
car,
I'll
it won't
fix it.
work for your car. So the code is tied directly to that piece of equipment, which we believe is the fail-safe on preventing hacking and tampering with the emissions and stuff like that they're worried people are going to do. Which I've already told them. I said a person right now can go in and tamp and put pieces in to bypass the emission stuff now. So it's not like that can't already be done. So that to me doesn't hold water. So yeah, we're down to a very finite component that if I'm going to put a bill in.
So I wonder what Lewis's read is on this conversation. What do you think? Like, the guy is not having, or this is my read. One of us, I might be wrong. I don't think the guy on the phone he's not having an honest conversation with Lewis. He's just trying to get him to fuck off. That's what it feels like right now. That like, oh yeah, we can't do this, blah, 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 blah. And he's hoping that, I guess, Lewis just isn't savvy enough to understand what the point is. Because like, everything relating to right to repair is dead without, in my opinion, it's dead without access to the software. Or firmware, maybe you could say. But like,
and I'm going to pinpoint on the issue that we've got, because the rest of that stuff, I'm afraid, is going to get hung up. I know I can't get the Republican support on the full-blown bill, but I know I can get them on our
pointless bill
on our farm equipment
that
bill.
does nothing.
Yeah, definitely introducing a farm equipment bill. And MacBooks are the most liquid-resistant computers ever made. I mean, you see what I'm getting at here. This is full of shit. At the time, it was just enough to be able to gaslight you into thinking, maybe they are on my side, they just disagree on this particular bill. But 1 year later, when the Farm Bureau signs a memorandum of understanding with John Deere that says, and I quote, Farm Bureau agrees to encourage state Farm Bureau organizations to recognize the commitments made in this MOU and refrain from introducing, promoting, or supporting federal or state right to repair legislation. I repeat, Farm Bureau agrees to encourage state Farm Bureau organizations to refrain from introducing, promoting, or supporting federal or state right to repair legislation. Are you surprised in any way, shape, or form that this gentleman's supposed draft legislation was never announced, that it never came out, that it never went anywhere? Wow, I'm so surprised that he never actually introduced anything, because he never intended to begin with, because the Farm Bureau is in the pocket of John Deere.
Okay, because on a farm equipment bill, I would be open and interested in helping you in any way possible getting that done. And to be quite honest, I'm surprised that was what you're proposing. Because when you said, I'm just going from the email that sent me. You said when you said most farmers don't care, have the knowledge to repair their own equipment. That has been so. I was like, is this something where you've surveyed? It's just because that's so far. That's pretty much the exact opposite of what I've heard from every farmer that I've ever spoken to across the country. So if anything, I thought that you would have been against any legislative solution, even one that would actually get you what you want. So I'm like pleasantly surprised that is your
farmers. So farmers want to fix what they can fix, but the vast majority of us that farm don't have the expertise, nor do we have all the equipment needed to.
These are lines given by these are lines that are going to be given by first party companies. Like Apple is going to say, he's just repeating now the verbatim talking points of the large companies. Oh, you can't repair your own stuff, like it's too complicated. You don't have the tools. You might void your warranty. You might make a mistake. You don't have the technical expertise. Like
fix some of the, these $100,000, $500,000 pieces of equipment. So a lot of farmers are not going to, even if they got this ability, they're not going to do it. The biggest
Maybe not the farmers, but third-party repair shops could.
thing that we're after of all the things is specific to our industry. We are seeing a lot of consolidation within the manufacturing and dealers in our region or across the country. And so as there becomes fewer and fewer businesses doing the services and providing technicians, it becomes more and more difficult to get somebody to work on your piece of equipment when you're in the middle of harvest or you're in the middle of planting, which is the two crunch times of the year. And what we're having problems with is that even if there is a retired technician that's our neighbor that's got 40 years worth of service with John Deere and probably knows these pieces of equipment better than the new technician, that person does not have the ability to fully fix that piece of equipment because and wouldn't go into doing that on the side if they can't finish the job. So why would I go buy, $500,000 worth of pieces of equipment to work on farm equipment if I can't do the computer pairing or the flashing of the software? Because when it comes down to it, if you put a new controller in a tractor, I could do all that as a third party, but if I can't get the software to flash that new controller to make that tractor work again, I'm going to have to call the dealer up anyway, and they're going to charge me $120 an hour and a service fee to come out just to plug a computer in. So that's the hang up that we've got right now, and the dealers are just not willing to budge. So
okay, I understand where you're coming from. Now, feel free to say no, but I need to be able to explain, when I'm modifying any of these bills or I'm asking them to be modified, just to give our donors what it is we're doing and why. Would you be comfortable with me saying that we have removed agriculture from this bill at the request, since Maryland Farm Bureau is not looking for a legislative solution this session? Would you be comfortable with that phrasing?
I'm just saying I would be more comfortable to. We were asking to have it separated. If we're going to move forward with any kind of fix, we want it to be on its own merit because we don't believe it's in the same. It would be in the same context as all additional things, whether it be a cell phone or whatnot. So we're most likely going to go after a legislative fix. I think the bill's coming in, but. I would rather it be talking about farm equipment and not be a kitchen sink bill.
Yeah, so you want it to be something where it's not just it's tossed in there, but it covers your specific issues and your specific cases with specific. Okay, I understand. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I don't want you to be late for your meeting. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Now, in the state of Colorado, we have a bill that's been introduced, and it's popular, and it only covers agricultural equipment. We're not going over medical equipment, iPhones, laptops, bicycles, cars, just agricultural equipment. He said his problem is that he wanted a bill that was very specific. The Farm Bureau wants something that's very specific, that only covers their specific use case so they can guarantee that it gets them what they want. So this bill has been written, and it is supported by literally everybody but him. When you take a look at the people that are supporting this particular bill, you essentially have everybody but him. You have the Colorado Department of Agriculture, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, corn growers, wheat growers, wool producers, fruit and vegetable producers, the cattlemen, and the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Literally every single group that has even 6 degrees of separation to do with farmers is supporting this legislation, but the Farm Bureau. So is it that A, he really wanted a bill that only supported his specific use case, or B, he was full of shit the entire fucking time?
Oh.
My guess
Where's that New Yorker?
is that it's B. But you tell me if you think I'm being melodramatic here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In my opinion, the Farm Bureau has been screwing their constituents over for a very, very long period of time, and I am very surprised that they have been able to get away with it for as long as they have. But this is the way corruption works. The way corruption works is you say things that are kind of plausible. Or, okay, I can kind of see where you're getting at there. But when you really dig into it, makes no sense. Instead of just saying like, hey, kill that bill. Here's the money that I'm just gonna like slip up your sleeve. That's not how it works. Everybody just thinks it's a dude just like slipping money up some dude's sleeve and him making it obvious. They don't make it obvious. And it is very, very difficult because the people that are the most corrupt, the people that are doing the most they can to destroy you are the very people that are going to pretend that they're helping you. That's politics and that's lobbying. It's absolutely disgusting, but I'm starting to learn how to play the game. And here's how I learned how to play the game. Don't play the game. I now have a scorched earth policy anytime I see this type of stupid shit. I don't care if it means that one or two legislators may not like me. I don't care if it means that some lobbyist or some politician may not like me. I don't care if somebody is going to point to me and say, look at this dude in his blue shirt and his weird cat scratch chair. He's unprofessional. I don't care. People can make fun of me as much as they want. They can insult my demeanor. They can insult the way I come off. They can insult my reputation. But at the end of the day, I am going to promise you all one thing. I am never for the rest of my life going to submit to somebody that says, play the game because that's how you win, because that's how you lose, that's how you get fucked, and that's how you feel like a bitch at the end of it when you do everything they tell you to do and you still get screwed. Every time something happens like this, my promise and commitment to all of you that donated to Repair Preservation Group Action Fund and all of you people that decide to just watch my channel because you find this stuff entertaining or interesting is that
I work in the arborist trade. I don't even know what that means. And this is an issue with all new heavy machinery. Everything can easily be fixed up the computer chips, i.e. long waits for part shipping, lack of expertise. Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I get with a lot of the car shit too. That like, it's not actually like there's some hyper specialized software that's only doing some fucking thing that only, it's more like we're gonna make some proprietary bullshit. You have to buy a special set of screwdrivers. You need to get a special software. You need to go to special tech. And they just lock it out to make it like basically so that they lock everything into their own repair system, which I think is bullshit.
All right, hello.
Oh, hello.
All right, sorry for that. I was on push to talk and I forgot to set it up.
Okay, what's up?
All right, basically the software that goes inside the firmware, it's all the information that requires to run the machine XYZ.
Wait, I don't know what you just said.
copyrighted.
That requires what?
The information to run the machine, to
Okay.
read the sensors, to do everything that the machine needs to do. That is copyrighted information. It took you a lot of time and effort to develop it. And just releasing it or be forced to release it puts you at a disadvantage against your competitors.
Don't we literally have like copyright infringement laws or trademark infringement laws in the United States? If somebody copies your stuff and starts mass producing it, then you sue them.
No, but in this scenario, you will never be able to show that it came from you because code can be very fine tweaked to make it not look like your code.
No shot. I don't believe that.
What do you mean, no shot?
I feel like projects get forked from other like binaries and shit all the time, and people can tell this was clearly lifted from this over here. Nobody's gonna steal code from somebody and go through and like hand tweak every single line to make it indistinguishable. No?
Absolutely. How much do you think those tractor trailers cost? Those are not 500 pieces of equipment. These are 1,000 pieces of equipment dollars. There is an economic incentive to obfuscate the code to make it look different, so you have your version.
Yeah, but if somebody lifts the code, somehow randomly creates their own version. Do you work with these machines? Like, are you in this? Or are you in a peripheral field?
No, I mean I'm basically a regular developer.
Okay,
but I'm somehow familiar with the principle of firmware.
Sure.
You just basically.
But we're talking about firmware that's, I imagine, is probably pretty specially fit to the hardware that the firmware is communicating with. Do you think somebody's going to start up a whole manufacturing line where they start producing like a whole set of tractors and stuff with all these parts and everything from code they've copied and modified? Like,
for the smaller pieces, probably. I mean, there is other companies that are competitors to John Deere. They're just dying to see how John Deere makes his tractors work. And not only that, even if they were to start from zero, just having that knowledge saves them hundreds of developing hours.
what's the point? Wouldn't this theoretically, is any code trademarked anywhere like in the United States ever? Also, wait, hold on.
Well, it's not trademark. Code is copyrighted. Separate technical thing.
Sure. Let's back up. Okay, what if I wanted to meet you halfway and I'd say, okay, fine. You don't have to give anybody access to the actual code itself. Why not mandate a set of APIs to be used so that you can have a way to communicate with it without requiring like a first-party intervention?
That could be something that it could be middle ground where you can still hide your copyrighted information and provide a way of other parties to plug into that. There were some long cases from long ago back where IBM had like a very strict control of the computer, where they wouldn't even let you see the actual electrical specifications of their elements. And they eventually lost, and they were forced to release how the actual computer parts connect to each other electrically. And that allows other vendors to now be able to build peripherals. But IBM lost that chunk of the market by doing that. So there is an economic damage to them if they're forced to do that. I so understand.
I can understand what you're saying, but I don't know, like, for right to repair, you don't necessarily have to like mandate a release of like the source code, right? Can't you just mandate that the tools used are given some kind of open access, or at the very least that there is like some, because you can create APIs on different levels, right? On different layers that give people access to the firmware or access to the hardware without necessarily like releasing binaries.
Correct, but let's separate two things.
Okay.
If you're releasing the API for something, specifically when, let's say, imagine your phone, your iPhone. Let's say that you want to change the camera because your camera is blurry. If you want to release an API that fixes that, you also have to, whenever you're making the code that makes the camera work, you have to assume at any point in time that everything is configurable. And that makes the actual creation of the software that controls that process very, very tedious. Imagine something like your phone, pick it up, look at it, the camera, the aperture, the time that it takes to control that little piece of glass. That is software control. But if you're telling me that now I have to create an API that releases those controls to somebody else, that increases my cost to make that thing exponentially because I don't know in which portion it can fail. So
I understand what you're saying on like a technical level, but on a macroscopic level, we're utilizing this concept of code copyright to mean that I don't have access to a single fucking thing I own, that I can't do anything. Like I could blow out this argument so that like, let's say that I have a phone and I want to like move buttons around on my home screen, but Google decides, or we'll say more likely Apple decides, if you want to modify your home screen, you have to bring this into a first party Apple vendor to do it. And I'm like, well, can't I just like install a program? It's like, no, we can't give access to that. No, we can't create tools for that. If you want to change anything on a device that you own, that's your physical device, because of copyright, you've got to go into a first party retailer to do it. Like that's
one of the things that I hear you talking about APIs and having to create different APIs and how this could be a pain in the ass. But let's just bring up an example in the John Deere instance. There's a piece of software that you need if you change a moisture sensor in a tractor, which depending on where you buy and like who you're asking, if you're talking about part cost versus what it sells for, let's say like a few $100 part on $1 million machine. Once you replace it, the tractor doesn't work until you connect John Deere software to it, where they use that software to clear a code that allows the moisture sensor to work. The tractor is able to tell that you've installed a new sensor, even though it is a John Deere sensor, John Deere OEM part. It can tell that you changed it, so it wants the dealer to plug in a piece of software. So we're not even talking about releasing source code. We're not talking about creating new APIs. We're simply saying, if you make the software available to the dealer, make it available to the owner. Can you explain how that would make your life more difficult as a software developer, or how this would compromise your code in any way, since the code would still be closed source?
Well, in that scenario, it wouldn't compromise your source code because your two endpoints of the piece are John Deere's equipment, the sensor that you bought, and the other one. In that scenario, you're simply forcing the vendor to be in the middle, being the company. But it's not quite the same as now saying you must accept a source from another competitor that may not be John Deere to work with your stuff.
Are you talking in that instance about, let's say, another
non-OEM part,
sensor that's made by somebody else?
Correct, like an OEM or something that you don't know if it's going to work for your software because you don't know how that sensor was made. So in that scenario,
this happened with the
fine.
iPhone 8. This happened with the iPhone 8 a while back, just like 4 or 5 years ago, where people would attach aftermarket screens and the aftermarket screen wouldn't work, but the OEM would. And it's because Apple had set it up in a specific way where the screen had, essentially the software had to talk to the screen and it wanted to get something back. And if it didn't get the specific thing back, then it just wouldn't allow the touch on the screen to work. And there were some people that said, well, listen, I mean, Apple shouldn't have to create something in a way where it works with other devices. And then there were other people saying, well, this self-test that's being run is obviously completely pointless because they disabled it and aftermarket screens worked for 5 years. So I hear the spirit of what you're saying, but I'm not seeing how it practically plays out and actually making it more difficult for either the software developer or worse for the consumer or even worse for the company.
Well, it makes it better for the company when you have those precautions in place because you can have a more close control over how your product is used. And yes, it does come as the downside that you have to go through the dealership. That I agree that it does.
I can understand what you're saying from a theoretical standpoint, which is if the company is allowed to make their software so that it doesn't work with anything else, you can theoretically protect the integrity of the customer experience. The problem is, while I can technically see the theoretical application of that, we're now seeing the practical implication of what happens when tens of millions of people are told you can't replace a part in what you own. And like this isn't, it's because honestly, the tractor stuff is really just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of what I'm dealing with now, I'm going to a medical conference in Houston because this is happening in the medical industry where you will have a $100,000 machine that has a problem with a $50 power supply, but they have to repurchase the entire thing because the piece of medical machinery will tell you change my $50 power supply, you have to buy a new one. And this is this kind of systemic issue that kind of, and it's not about protecting the integrity of it has nothing to do with that. It just winds up being about the company making more money off of trying to control what you do with what you own. And like in so many of these little checks, they're not, it's literally just checking a serial number, and it's just, if the serial number is different, just don't allow this to work. And
or even as a compromise, I feel like most people, I think, would be okay with this. Make it so that like you can work with non-OEM parts, and then if it breaks, your warranty's void. I'd be okay with that. Fuck it. Like, let me put in a new screen. Let me do it. And if the warranty's void on it, then fuck it. Fine. Then the warranty's void. But like, I understand this. I'm gonna repeat what Rossmann said. I understand the ideology about like, oh, I've got like more control over my platform, more control over what goes on. But I don't buy that. That there's like so much advantage to the consumer there. I think that it's just the proprietary lock-in makes it so that consumers are locked into buying your products, especially when you're in the business of selling them, right? I think also we might have, or I don't want to speak for Lewis, I might have a different feeling too if so many of these companies weren't in charge of selling the very products that they're locking their system to. I might feel a little bit differently about it. Like, let's say John Deere said, sorry, you can only do this with first-party like retailers, second-party retailers, and it's a bunch of companies that make those types of products. I'd probably feel a little bit differently about it, but I'm guessing, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing John Deere and all this stuff, they're probably the OEM for all of these parts. They probably make them all, right? And then you're locked into buying only shit from them. That starts to feel a little bit more salacious, I think, if that is the case. Yeah.
Well, the thing, the farmers are not even complaining that they have to buy the parts from John Deere. They're complaining that once they buy the part, it doesn't work until the dealer comes out, plugs their computer in, and says, you may now use your tractor again.
Yeah.
Which is
and
like
one solution that I can
sorry.
propose for that is simply the free market. You have to have a company that makes a better tractor that all the parts are plug and play without the dealership to come on. Or in the case of phone, or a better phone, that the parts are not so intertwined that you are locked into the vendor. But in both scenarios, the free market and the people prefer the more complex thing because it's overall a better product.
Well, do they prefer it necessarily? For instance, let's just say before 1 year, because a bunch of companies are starting to come out with these repair programs now. Let's say that it's the year 2019. I want to buy a phone. I want to buy a smartphone from a company that will make a schematic available to an independent vendor. Name one. Is because like I hear what you're saying from, again, like the anarcho-capitalist standpoint, but like in terms of the practical reality of it, how do I exercise that right of choice? I guess technically somebody could say I could exercise that right of choice by purchasing a carbon phone or like a rotary phone or something. Mm-hmm. But and you could make that argument. But for so many of these types of items, if you want to buy from a company that does not have this practice, it just fundamentally doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, and I think
phones were not there yet. But for example, in laptops, there is this company that basically lets you set different laptops part. And you can make your own laptop. You can buy the motherboard from here. You can swap and put, no, I don't want a USB drive. I want an Ethernet cable. So you can actually build your own laptop. That's a response to having such a locked-in product. You just have to allow the free market to come with it.
I think the issue, though, with some of these things is there's so much integration. I don't know if you were here yesterday. We had the same conversation. There's so much integration with some of these products that, like, you have no choice. You're locked in. Like, let's say you really wanted to buy an electric vehicle, but let's say Tesla's automatically installed 8-inch dildos on their seats. And you're like, I hate driving my Tesla around because I'm always getting fucked in the ass every single time I get in my car. And somebody's like, oh, well, why don't you just buy a car? The free market will make a car that doesn't have dildos installed in the seats. And you're like, okay, well, where are the charging stations? Oh, hold on. Tesla has the largest charging stations built out across the entire United States. Nobody else is allowed to use them. So it looks like if I want to buy an electric vehicle, I've got to get used to taking an 8-inch dildo up my ass. And I think that's what all of these types of ecosystems start to feel like with these software companies, where somebody can say, like, kind of offhand, like, oh, well, the free market will decide. It's like, no, they won't. There's so much vertical integration with some of these things that you're basically locked into using like one person's products for an entire thing. Otherwise, it's like, it's so inconvenient. They're not really competing anymore on like the best product. They're competing by locking you into an ecosystem that would take so much work to break you out of, I think.
I think you're looking at it years after the best product has won. Just looking at the cell phone market, right after Apple wiped out Motorola. And in the early 2000s, right before when the iPhone came out, there were a lot of different cell phones out there, but Apple wiped out most of them. They just got wiped out because the Apple iPhone was just a better product, and it included all those features that now we're 10 years removed, and we think, oh, we're being locked into it. Yes, you are, but on the other hand, it's gotten you this great product. The same with the tractors. Yeah, those John Deere tractors are incredibly technologically complex. They require just one person on the front of the whole field by themselves. Like those things are amazing compared to tractors from 30, 40 years ago.
Implements and heavy
It does have this downside.
Him in for this conversation.
I mean, like, just because a product is won at one point in time doesn't mean you want them to own the market for the rest of eternity, right? Like, yeah, when iPhones came out, they were fucking awesome. I'm glad we've got Android phones now, too. Might be cool if we had even more phones. Just because a product comes out and dominates the market for, like,
Well, I
half
think
a
there's
decade.
a question to be.
Yeah.
But then it's because people prefer them.
I agree, they do. But people bought the iPhone. Do you know why people bought the iPhone in 2007? They bought it because it was the best phone on the market. Today, people buy iPhones because they're locked into the iPhone ecosystem. It's still a good phone. But the question, it's still a good phone. But the question of, I know this because of the phones that I buy. It's because I'm locked into ecosystems, right? In order to get me to switch to an iPhone, it would take an inordinate amount of luring that Apple would have to do because I've got all my shit on Google, my Google Calendar, my Gmail, my Google accounts, everything, my Google Suite, all of it is locked in on that shit, right? When iPhone came out in 2007, that was the best phone on the market, hands down, and people bought it, and that's awesome. But then when they try to lock you in with all the verticality, well, now it's not necessarily the best phone you're buying. Now it's going to be the phone that is at least good enough and then keeps you locked into their ecosystem.
If all your things right now on your iPhone is tied to your Google account, you should switch to Android without any issues.
If what?
If all the items that you use on your Apple phone are using your Google services, switching to the competitor shouldn't be an issue.
No, I'm saying I use Android because I use all the Google services.
I thought you said you used...
No, I'm saying if I wanted to switch to Apple, they would have to like pull me away from all the Google services. And then same thing with people that use like Apple and iTunes and all that shit. Like Google would have to pull them away from that ecosystem. But it's like, I'm just saying it's not fundamentally a fight over who has the best products. It's a fight over like how much do you get like sucked in to like an abusive relationship with an ecosystem now where they can start to create products that do things that are arguably shitty that like, I don't just buy these things. Bro, I remember for PSPs and shit, you could swap the screens out. And it was risky, and sometimes you bricked your device because you were a fucking retard. But like, I think you could do cool shit back then where you could repair your shit, you could order parts on eBay, and I feel like it was a better market for everybody. If you wanted to, you go to a first party or third party retailer, but even the idea, I don't know how far Lewis would go with this, but like, I feel like even for some of the right to repair shit, even if they were like, we don't want customers touching it, fucking fine, but at least let third-party retailers have access to the schematics or the software to do these repairs, so it doesn't have to be a first-party retailer. Like, at the very least, that should be okay.
That's what they did with the car industry. A lot of the stuff that was made available to the independent service centers with the 2012 Right to Repair Bill in Massachusetts and the update to it in 2020, it made this stuff available to independent mechanics that did not make it available to, the software available to a dude in his house. I'm like, I would prefer that it be available to the owner of the product, but at the very least, it should be as like that's one step forward. Like Framework did the same thing. They made schematics available to independent service centers, but not to the public. I prefer they make it available to everybody. That's my preference. That's what's written in the bills that I advocate for. But that I will acknowledge that at least making it available to somebody is better than just keeping it available to the first party. But to the point that you made, which is that people prefer these products, that's where they buy them. They buy them, but would they actually be buying those products if they knew down the line that they were going to squeeze you to the point where a moisture sensor is serialized? Like in 2007, would somebody have bought a John Deere tractor that plows the field if they knew that once they bought that item, that 5 or 6 or 7 years later, that was then going to be changed to a point where it would not allow them to actually work on it? It's like one example that just came up. I'm just about to upload a video on this, but I wanted to butt in here with HP printers. HP makes a printer. They have this dynamic security bullshit where if you put an ink cartridge in it, it will only work if it is HP's ink cartridge, but it occurred via a software update. So you could have bought their printer where the HP printer works with any ink cartridge you choose. You download a software update because you feel like you should be up to date on all your software for your printer, and then it stops working with the ink cartridge inside of it. Did the customer actually choose that? Did they choose to get fucked? Did they know that they were going to be fucked at a date in the future? Or did they just buy it thinking, man, this is a really great product. It does everything I want. It's better than everything else in the market. I'm not going to pretend that I'm Nostradamus and can see into the future to figure out 6 years from now how this company is going to fuck me once they put everybody else out of business.
No, in that scenario, what you're describing, the printer seems to be a deceptive maneuver in which the software was updated at a later date and it prevented you from doing that, something that you may not have agreed on when you bought the item or known of. But if the item is like that when you buy it, and by nowadays we know how most of them are, it's not a new surprise. It's not a
But
surprise to
like my
purchase.
point is when you say that people chose this, if people choose a product from a company because they make the best product and they keep choosing it to the point where everybody else goes out of it, everybody else is no longer an option or out of business, and then you're one of the only ones left. You have like 95% of everybody using you. You have the market share. You have all this money because you were able to get to the particular point that you're at as a result of having so many people buy your product. And then on a dime, you just switch. Like the way you're phrasing it, I mean, I can understand the moral and ethical argument if you're making that as an anarcho-capitalist completely, even if I didn't 100% agree with it. But I can't agree with what you're saying, which is users chose this. They chose to buy from this company, but that doesn't mean that once that company flips on a dime to deciding that we want to abuse consumers, that consumers chose to get abused. They chose to buy what was the best at the time. They can't choose the way a company is going to change into the future. Once that company is the only company left that makes a viable product for what it is they want to do, you're kind of screwed at that point. Like, you know, even if you're talking about smartphones, like if I want to buy a smartphone that has a schematic, you essentially have to buy a Fairphone. And but many areas of the world where you literally can't even buy it. It's not like the consumer can technically choose because every single company that managed to survive just turned on a dime and said, we're just not allowing independent access to anything. It's like the consumer is essentially choosing in a marketplace where every item from every company enacts the same practices. So like I could understand the moralistic argument, which is, you know, find yourself a benevolent billionaire who will invest his money into shit that destroys them. And admittedly, that's kind of what I did last year when I took this job at this new company. But like and I can understand that as a moralistic argument, but I can't understand. I can't like accept the argument that consumers actually chose this. That doesn't make sense.
It kind of feels like a frog in a pot. We were kind of like being slowly boiled alive, and it's too late by the time you realize it. Like I said, like when people chose the iPhone in 2007, that was the best phone on the market, hands down. But like things have changed, and now with iPhone having, do iPhones have what is like 50% market share, and then the other 50% is like Android. Like they have the ability to enact so much more than what they ever could in the past. So then it feels like a little bit like a bait and switch, I guess. It's kind of, I don't know. It doesn't feel good as a consumer.
No, it definitely doesn't. But the other option is just to have another company come up into the market and bring a product that is swappable or.
But it would have to be a company that could compete with that entire ecosystem. We're not competing on products anymore. We're competing on universes. I think that's the issue.
Right. What Lewis was saying before, and I'm somebody who's worked in this industry. I worked for a company for nearly 2 years, and I was actually a technician that worked every single day with diesel technicians and mechanics and farmers, people from off-highway equipment to tractors to diesel engines, anything in between, generators. And the big issue here is like there is no viable competition. John Deere, Cat, Peterbilt, all these manufacturers, they have top-end vertical integration, everything from the hardware to the software. And the issue here is, at that point, there is no ability for any other further kind of communication or any competition to be viable, because at that point, these are purpose-built machines that are. And when Lewis was saying that these companies have gigantic sums of market share, you can't use anything else for that point. So it's not viable at that point to just say, oh, just have a third-party kind of competitor come out this. And not to mention, at the company that I worked at, I'm not going to name it because there's other things going on with that as well. There are cease and desist constantly. I, as well as all the people that worked at that company, were named in cease and desist and threatens of lawsuits by John Deere and Cat, which are the two biggest proponents of this kind of bullshit argument that the independent repair shops specifically, or even farmers or other people that are working on this equipment, shouldn't be able to have any access to it. And as for your kind of point earlier about saying that this is just something about like safety, nobody's asking to put third-party ECMs or ECUs or any of that other equipment in there. The issue here is that they gatekeep this software behind their dealerships, and this is all a money-making practice. They don't want to lose revenue at the dealerships, which I think there's a fine line between that. If you made a product, you want to be able to do service for that, but telling consumers and even other third-party repair shops that there's no way, no how, is just bullshit. I mean, a bill to just reflash an ECU, right, would potentially. I had people who I dealt with; they were quoted $3,000 to $5,000, and for an independent repair shop, that's an obscene amount of money.
I guess we disagree, particularly when you're talking about reflashing a chip with pieces of copyrighted code. You have to have the source code in order to put into the chip. So in order for you to like give that to your competitors, it just feels like.
Wait, why do you need access to the source code to do anything?
No. That's not true. It's not true. I know
source
because
code is not
I've
needed for any of this.
I have reflashed ECUs on Cummins engines. I've done it on Peterbilt engines. I've done it on Cats. I've done it on John Deere. It's not this complicated techno wizard thing. It's a little file that you push into it through whatever the communication protocol that you're using, and that's it, right? It is purely a money making motive. It's not some kind of weird like this shit we would keep in a Google Drive folder where we keep it on an internal thing. This is not that idea that you have to be using some kind of source code as some proprietary thing. It's just not true. It's just not
Let's
true.
say that banner that you're flashing has inbuilt in from the factory a check that says you can only
you can
use
use literally third party. The issue here is that you can do this with like homegrown stuff. It's just that they are serializing it and building it just like the Apple approach, where they're making it to where only their equipment based on certain parameters will work. I know because you can make these basic communication protocols, and it'll work if assuming that it's old enough equipment that hasn't already been patched or made to where it's only allowed from the manufacturer.
Yeah, I agree. That's a business decision that they made to have the software only work with data to be delivered that way. I mean, I guess we disagree on that you think that should be available for everybody. I guess we disagree on that.
No, it's not that I necessarily think it, and I'm also a software developer, right? So like I understand I understand what goes into that, and I'm not saying that this code should be freely marketable to everybody, but the issue here specifically when it comes to with the conflict with John Deere is people aren't asking for the source code to be available and open to everybody. They're just asking for equitable access to the resources, right?
What is
That's the
resources for
disclaimer.
you in this scenario?
This is trouble codes. This is hardware. This is software that you can use to maintain your stuff. They're not asking for it to just be something they can just have for themselves, but having to go to a dealer specifically if you want to get one thing done and it costs you thousands of dollars.
Yeah, or like let's say like this is I just even getting away from like these micro arguments, right? Let's back up and let's say that a company makes a home control device. I've got a device that I stick on my wall, and it allows me to control my thermostat, the temperature of my refrigerator, the water pressure in my showers, all of that stuff. Let's say that it does that, okay? And I get it, and it's really convenient. That's cool. Let's say that one day I want to go. This is the Amazon home control unit. Let's say one day I want to go and I want to replace my shower head, and I go and I buy a new shower head and I install it, and the device says, "Sorry, your shower can't work right now. You need to bring an Amazon authorized tech to come over here and okay the part, even though it's completely compatible, it works and everything." Like, I feel like you would be defending that environment. You say, well, you know, they have to make sure that it's compatible. They've got to make sure that the serial number lines up, and you need to bring an Amazon authorized tech over in order to okay the part. Like, how is that any different from the car example, where we're using software as this excuse to lock people out of even replacing hardware? Like, it's not like somebody wants to do like a modification of the source code or a modification of like the underlying program to fundamentally change the nature of the machine that's operating.
I'm
the argument there would be that you
option
chose
of the
it.
company to do that. And what you're saying is like you want the company to be forced to not to do that, to be able to take anybody. And from my point, it's like, no, the company has the right and it makes some design decisions over how to implement their products or not. And what you're saying is like from an outside source or if an outside vendor now has control over how your product should look like, how your software should interact. And when you're making software, you have no control over that. So you make it you make it one way, it works. And then once everybody else wants to copy it, if possible, if you allow them to copy, then that's still your choice of even say no to that. I mean, it shouldn't be by law.
It's not. No one is asking to like modify any of the firmware. It sounds like from what Lewis is talking about, for instance, like just swapping out.
You are. If I have on the source code, if source is different than John Deere, then reject. That is a modification.
Oh, come on. You're like tautologically winning the argument by like, if we put the most absurd things in the what if the source code says
that's
like.
What they actually do. That's what they actually do.
Yeah, I know, but that's not like a legitimate, like, that's not a legitimate restriction, right? That's like saying.
How can it not be a legitimate restriction? It is a legitimate restriction.
There's
it's my product. I make it however I want it to be.
Okay.
I mean, now you're telling iPhone how they should make their phones?
It is anti-consumerist to say you can't swap out even the fact that I hate that we're even having this discussion
You're not
about
telling
OEM
them how to
hardware.
make their phone. You're telling them to not tell other people how to use their device.
Yeah, and we shouldn't even restrict it to OEM hardware. You should be able to buy aftermarket parts and swap them out. We used to do this in cars all the fucking time. I don't even know if you can do this anymore.
The capitalist argument here comes down to nothing but I should have the freedom to restrict your freedom. My freedom to restrict your freedom is the freedom that is paramount above all else. Like
Don't buy the product.
We're not even telling you how to make the iPhone. We're just saying if you are going to make the iPhone however the fuck you want. You could use a lightning port USB-C. You could use a cloaca for all I give a shit. Don't make it so that if somebody else attaches another cloaca to the device, then you're going to say, sorry, different serial number than the original. Fuck you, and tell you that you have to buy another one.
So
Yeah,
just
that's
so we're
exactly
clear, you
what
are
John
telling
Deere
them
does
how
most
to
of the
make
time.
it.
The
within a
problem with
certain parameter.
anarcho-capitalism to me is that the freedom that is secured above all else is the freedom of one small group of people to fuck you. It's like, it's not about you as a consumer having freedom. It's not about you as a property owner having freedom, which is something that people that tend to, care about. It's about one person having the freedom to take away your freedom. Like that is because what you're saying, you're taking away the developer or the corporation's freedom. But you're literally talking about this very, very narrow use case where they are only using their freedom to take away yours for no reason.
And nobody's taking away your freedom. I'm not telling you to buy the phone. Nobody's forcing you to buy the tractor. When I make that product, I make it with certain conditions and with certain rules. That
Okay,
is
did
my
you make
freedom.
that product under those conditions before you were dominant in the marketplace?
Doesn't
Before you
matter
had
if you're dominant
30
or
or
not.
40 or 50% market share, did you make that product where the parts were serialized? Yes or no?
For this argument, let's say that no. But at any point in time, I deserve the right for future versions to add it.
Okay, so you wait until you have 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70% market share, and then you just turn on a dime and you say you have a choice.
Yes. Well, I the company.
You call that choice? You call that choice? That's bullshit, bro.
Dude, you can go to the corner and buy a phone, a flip phone without that thing. You as the customer make the choice. How is that not clear? You just don't like it because it locks you to other stuff. It's the same idea. In the same case, how is it not the same idea? When you have a very complex piece of machinery.
Because you had more than one or two brands of smartphones that were dominant at the time when this wasn't the case. These companies didn't start by doing this. They only did this once they got to the point where they were most of the market share. And then once there's virtually nothing left, then they start making these decisions. Then they stop making everything else available. Like you're talking about it as if there's choice. There's choice in theory. There is not in practice. I could at least respect if you said, in theory, this is what it would work, or from a philosophical point of view, here's why I think this. You're pretending that that's reality, and that's bullshit.
So in practice, in the case of the tractor field, there is no other tractor available for them to buy aftermarket 15-year-old tractor that they can actually use. It may require more maintenance, it may require more people, but it doesn't contain all the bells and whistles, all the automatic GPS tracking. Are you telling me that those tractors do not exist?
Hold on. So the issue is not whether they exist, and they absolutely do. And a sizable portion of people that are using these are going to be using that equipment. The issue then is at that point is that John Deere is going, okay, tough shit. We're not going to support that anymore because we're the manufacturer. And that's where the other issue comes in. And actually a large number of the fleets that are being used in off-highway purposes for agricultural use are 15, 20 years old because of the restrictions that have been put on. But that's not feasible after a certain amount of time because a lot of these products are purpose built for specific things, and they're fleet managed a lot of times as well. And this impacts everybody down to just like the run of the mill, like farmer in Wisconsin, all the way up to these big gigantic fleets.
Hold on, when you
kind of stuff like that.
When you say fleet managed, is it possible to even manage different like manufactured vehicles with one another, or is there like an ecosystem at function?
They're all built in. They're all different segregated ecosystems, basically.
Oh Jesus!
Now
fuck.
there's other third party softwares out there that exist to do things like this. The biggest one being Texa. I believe it's the OEM software manufacturer for Lamborghini. Actually, they're based in Italy, but they're one of the biggest manufacturers of third-party equipment that interfaces with everything off-highway, on-highway, even diesel engines like your Fords, your Rams, and other stuff like that. And that was a lot of the software that I worked on. But even then, that is constantly getting into all sorts of legal battles with John Deere because John Deere's just suing the shit out of them. But they're making everything their own communication protocols, or trying their best to. But it's this kind of mouse and like cat and mouse game where they'll come out with some way, they'll figure out how to get around some kind of thing that's been put in by John Deere. John Deere will push out an update through all the dealerships, which is why they require you to come in and get the ECU flashes, because they're trying to reroute around the third-party people. It's this kind of like intentional malicious interference, which is the real big issue here.
I mean, the only thing that I have to say to that is you basically need another company to come up in the market and make a tractor that doesn't have all these features.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that, though, but like that doesn't solve the problem here and now, right? Especially when you have these companies that are buying them up as well, or just suing them out of existence, right?
I don't disagree about another company that should come along and actually make something that doesn't do this. What I'm disagreeing with is when you say the consumer chose this. Like when they bought this product in 1999 and bought into it, they bought into the idea that, by the way, by buying this product, you are supporting a company that will put other companies into lower market share to out of business. And as a result of doing it, once they reach that point, they will serialize their products to the point where you can't fix it yourself. Like that was not written in the contract. That was not in the manual. That was not in the advertisement. That was not said at the dealer. Like, they didn't make that choice. You can say that I believe that the government should have no say whatsoever and that it should be a purely contractual. Like, again, I can understand the anarcho-capitalist argument to it, even if I don't necessarily agree to it. I just can't agree with, like, when you say they chose it. Like, that's just bullshit.
Let me ask you a
Because
question.
none of these products are advertised this way. No cell phone, no computer. None of these products are advertised saying, by the way, the moment that we become this dominant force, we will take away your freedom to do what you want with what you own. Just know that when you buy it. Because if they did, nobody would be buying it. But they don't say that. They don't make their intentions up front.
I don't know how many other people feel this way, and maybe because I'm a little bit more techy, maybe different, but like if I would have known the verticality that like Windows would have hit with like integrating like fucking Cortana and the Windows Store, and that like my fucking operating system is turning into software as a service, I probably would have learned Linux like 5 or 10 years ago. I would have learned how to configure Wine. I would have probably cried a lot about like Linux compatibility issues, but I think I would have just learned how to use, so I would have learned how to use some Linux OS rather than like the disgusting shit that like Windows has turned into. But like I've been using it for my whole fucking life. All my shit works with it, and I'm kind of like sucked into it. But I didn't know, when Windows 7 came out, that eventually we would have like fucking Windows Store integration like on like the OS level.
But that's not new, right? Apple's been doing that for ages.
Is Apple has the same type of like ads and shit that pop up on? Maybe I don't know if it does or not. I'm not sure. But if it worked that way, if it worked that way on iOS, I'd feel the same way about iOS. I'm not here to stand for Apple's operating system.
I mean, you're free to use Linux. I mean, definitely has a lot of downside in terms of user usability. That's why it's not as common for a desktop computer.
Yeah, but I think a lot more people probably would have used it if they saw the direction that Windows was going initially. But once you've got the market share and you've got people locked in, I think it's a lot different at that point. I think that's the issue.
I think you're underestimating the complexity of using Linux as your operating system, as how many other programs have a compatibility with it. I mean, one of the reasons that Microsoft...
Yeah, but everything you're saying right there is more issues for like you said yourself. I'm not even choosing the best OS. I'm choosing based on verticality. I'm not choosing what the best OS is. I'm choosing what the best programs that work with my OS are. Or like, how do you feel about the fact that like some games are like optimized for NVIDIA? That like sometimes some GPU manufacturers are like working directly with game companies to make sure that their games are optimized the best for their graphics cards. Like, shouldn't we just be picking what has the best hardware and not people that are... Man, I just hate verticality.
Because a lot of those things comes down to subjectivity. Like, what's better, is an Xbox or a PlayStation?
Yeah, but nobody likes that either. Are you making the argument that like exclusives are good for the market?
No, but you're making the argument that there should be just one bland console and then software should work on it.
No, I'm not saying it should be bland. I make the console how you want, but I'm just saying that like when we...
By bland, I mean generic. Let me just...
Dude, consoles are generic anyway. How long does it take before you can actually make it...
They're not generic, because you cannot take the disc from one and plug it into the other.
No, but I'm saying, like, in terms of like even utilizing hardware, when you're PlayStation 5, how long until you actually get a game that's released and built for the PlayStation 5 that's not just some bullshit that has to work on the PS4 at half the frame rate? Like, how cucked... Even on newer games on consoles, they cuck themselves out to the past games. It's not like, well, it's restricted to the PS5 so they can run the most cutting-edge technology. That's not even true. It's just to lock them into their shit, and that's why they still ship those games compatible for the last generation of consoles so that they still maximize their sales. I think it's all anti-consumerist behavior, in my opinion. It's stuff that fucks us over. It doesn't benefit us, like, at all. We're not gaining from any of this. Like...
Well, you just said it right there, to maximize sales. The job of the company is to keep on going and make sales.
Yes, I agree. But that sometimes that comes at the cost to the consumer. And I think that in like this John Deere case, it's just... I'm not even that old. I'm only 34, but like I remember with cars, you could buy and sell and swap so many aftermarket parts for your cars, and everything worked fine. People weren't flying off the road because they had an aftermarket remote start. They weren't flying off the road because they bought like an aftermarket. I don't even know if you can do that anymore. Even with car stereos, to plug a new thing in, you've got to buy like 15 proprietary plugs sometimes, and half the shit won't even be integrated anymore with your steering wheel. I don't know what the market is like today for cars, but even in my lifetime, I saw that change. And it's not like, I don't know if all the new functionality is there to justify, like, oh, well, as a consumer, I understand I'm getting fucked out of all these different options, but hey, at least I have like XYZ feature. Like,
all right, let me put an example in terms of cars. Last week, my car blew like the check engine turned on. Mm-hmm. They took it to a dealership. They plugged in that thing on the bottom and said your vacuum has issues.
Yeah.
No one had to do anything on the car other than that plug that in. 20 years ago, that would have not been possible. 25 years ago, that would have not been possible.
Say that one thing again. I'm sorry, say that again.
The check engine came on.
Okay.
I took it to a mechanic, not even the dealership, mechanic.
Yeah.
They plugged in a little computer on the bottom of it, and they say, hey, your vacuum, the one that gives you the air to the carburetor or to the injector, it's a little messed up.
Yeah.
25 years ago, that level of diagnosis with that level of precision would have not been able to.
Okay, so I think you've given the perfect example. What you're talking about, well, unless I'm a fucking moron, I don't know newer cars, but I think what you're talking about is something called the OBD2 port.
Yes.
That port is universalized, I believe, on cars, right? Like,
Yes.
you can go to any car, you can go to an AutoZone, and if you're listening, by the way, if you have a check engine light, you can go to an AutoZone, or you can go to I think Tuffy's or whatever. There are like 2 or 3 big car shops in the United States. You go there and you say, hey, can you run a diagnostic on my car? They plug that in and they check it. But in John Deere's world, that would be illegal. You can't check that. You have to buy their software. You've got to go to their first-party technician. They're the ones that have to plug their special machine in. You can't pull those codes out on your own. Like, in John Deere's world, things like Haynes manuals don't exist. Things like the OBD2 port doesn't exist. I think that's what we're arguing for, is the existence of that port that you just brought up.
Yes, they have a proprietary port and a connection protocol that they're going to be using, right? And as I said, there are third-party solutions that have come in and they trick that. But at the end of the day, that's what happens when I'm talking about like the cat and mouse game, where they're maliciously trying to circumvent these third-party users from interfacing with their stuff. And there's whole bunches of resources out there that have the trouble codes, the diagnostic trouble codes, all that information, and can communicate over that. But that's the whole crux of the issue, is that they're using a proprietary connection protocol, they're using proprietary software, and they're saying that the only way that you can do this and get even something as simple as like a vacuum pump, right, fix is go to one of our dealerships. Otherwise, tough stuff, right?
But I'm pretty sure that OBD2 port, that's universalized on all cars.
And it didn't start like that.
Yes.
Each individual manufacturer had their own communication 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, and
eventually
I think the federal,
they coalesced
Hold on,
into
wait.
one.
Wait, did they
I have
coalesce,
a
or did the
20
federal government come in and
No,
say,
hold on.
What?
I have like a 2012 car and it has an OBD2 port. It's not just like a couple years ago. This is.
Oh no, this is like
all the way-
25 years old. I had this on my 95 Dodge Neon.
This is the
Yeah.
OBD. The original OBD1 protocol is brought, I think, from like the 90s, early 2000s, and OBD2 is newer. Obviously, it's the next kind of rendition of it. But it's a standard. It's a standard in all consumer vehicles. And even a lot of the times, what's even funnier is on a lot of, you can go back and just a couple years ago see John Deere and even off-highway equipment, it has an OBD port, but they've disabled it because they don't want you to use it, and they make you use their proprietary one, right? And you see this even on purpose-built, like these big like 18-wheelers, your Cummins, your Peterbilts, they all have OBD, and they'll allow for some basic communication, right? You can do the trouble codes, you can check and see, like check engine, but that's about as far as you can go before you have to go to their proprietary connector if you want to do anything past that.
Which feels like it kind of sucks.
Yeah, after 2008, the OBD, I guess, was standardized, but before that, it was separate. All right.
There's no, I had this on a 95 Dodge Neon, I had this on a 97 Saturn. There's no way.
Well, they started in the 1960s, Volkswagen, the first onboard computer.
Okay.
It was great talking to you guys.
All right.
See you
Be
guys.
careful.
Great South Park reference, by the way.
Who?
The car with the dildo.
Oh, wait, I didn't even know that was a South Park reference, but okay.
Oh, you never seen the machine that Mr. Garrett made? You should watch that episode.
I'll think about it, okay? Okay.
Have a good day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really have anything else to say. I just wanted to argue with that guy who's has no awareness. Lewis, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if he at least made the argument, because like the best argument against right to repair is the freedom to be an asshole. You know, like as a company in America, I should be able to run my company how I want. You're welcome to buy it or not buy it. I can understand it even if I have some disagreement with it. I just can't like understand the like consumers chose this. It's like bullshit. Like, show me on the brochure where it says 3 years from now, your purchase contributes to our market domination, so that 3 years from now, when the competitors are no longer competitive or relevant as a result of being starved from money, we are going to serialize all our components. Like, if a manufacturer put that in the brochure in their ad, like, God bless them. Then that means that we did indeed choose this shit. But like,
this is a big thing on the ABS systems as well. This is a big fight that's happening as well, because there's basically 2 major providers for the ABS systems that are used particularly for on highway, so for like trucking, right? And they have incredibly proprietary methods. They don't want you doing anything outside of going to their specific dealerships for any kinds of issues with it. And again, there's those third-party systems that exist that are working to bypass those, but it's going back to that kind of cat and mouse game where they come out with a fix, and then maybe a couple months later, the manufacturer comes out and says, no, we're not going to do that anymore, and they change up the way that it communicates. You shouldn't, as a consumer, be having to go spend even then like insane amounts of money on a third-party solution. You should just be able to go to your first party, or anybody really, and be able to get the work done to your equipment that you bought, because it's expensive, right? And you're using this for your job, so it's just, yeah.
Yeah. I think the argument that triggers me the most is that like when they say that it's actually better for you if you don't have access to it, like this actually protects you. Like I think there are some examples where that can be true. So like if somebody was making pacemakers and they said we're gonna lock consumers out of all the software related to this because if they fuck with it, somebody might blow their heart out. Like okay, fine, I buy that there. But like again, for like car shit, like we had open access to a lot of car stuff for a long time. Are we really benefiting by all of these systems being locked down? Like I don't know if I believe that.
I could almost make the argument for it when it comes to electric. Like, have you ever tried to set the PID loop on a motor controller?
Nope.
Okay, so like with a car, let's say you're trying to supercharge your own car or something, you try to put like turbo or something, you're gonna make it maybe 30, maybe like max like 50% more power or something like that. But when again, I'm not a car person, so I'm very like loosely paraphrasing here. But if you have let's say just a controller for an e-bike, if you make a typo in your integral gain and you type in 2000 instead of 20, it will shoot the chain. It will actually snap the chain, shoot it off of the bike into the wall, and leave a hole in your drywall. Like, ask how I know that one. But it's very easy to make these really, really like you wouldn't want to allow somebody to make a mistake where just making a typo causes the wheels to actually blow off the car. Because I was speaking to this person who works for a car company I can't talk about because he has an NDA. But he was saying if you made that PID loop mistake, or if you made that mistake with the software we use, the car wouldn't move. There's enough power in the car to just make the wheels shoot off of the car, and they would shoot off of the car with enough power that it would actually go through the walls of a house.
Yeah, but this would be a thing where like if the companies actually really cared, I bet that there would be like some sort of firmware setting where it's like, do you have like safety tolerances on or off? And you'd be able to like turn those off if you wanted to, and then it would be completely your own discretion. But they could like limit some of those features unless you actually like flip the switch to do something, right? Like if you really cared, rather than just saying like, oh well, no, nobody's software but ours can handle this.
Yeah, so like one of the big like a perfect example of this is what you're saying, Lewis, in terms of like actual legitimate safety. One of the big requests that I got when I was doing the job that I was doing was I would get a call from somebody who was like a fleet manager. They were a driver, and they would say, "Hey, this truck that I'm driving is dog shit slow. I'm limited to 65 or 75 miles an hour on the highway. If I go, like, doesn't matter how much further I press the pedal, I'm not going any faster." And that gets into some potential dicey territory because some of these guys are going, I don't want any speed limit. I want to be able to go as fast as I want down the highway with 50,000 pounds in tow. And then you can make arguments at that point and go, okay, maybe there's a balance that has to be made here because you don't want some of these guys going, going pedal to the metal, just flying down the interstate at 105 miles an hour and potentially putting themselves or other people at risk. So there's that fine line that has to be made. But like most of these, the things that these people are asking for is most of the time not that. It's like, hey, my DPF filter, which is like the diesel particulate filter, part of the California emission standards that are standard for all diesel engines, that filter is throwing an error. It's showing that like my ash collector on it is full. Can I clear that? And the normal answer would be you have to go to the dealership and pay $300 to $500 for them to just clear that code. And that's really what they're asking for. It's not some kind of crazy, complicated proprietary thing, or it shouldn't be. It's just so they can get their fucking job done, and so that they can go do the deliveries. So
It's also the law it's also the law that the company specifically cannot claim that you're not allowed to make this that you can say that emissions law is the reason that you're not making that diagnostic software available. And I pasted the relevant text into the chat. I don't know if it allowed it because it was a URL.
Lewis, can I ask you a legal question?
Go for it. You probably get bad legal advice, but go for it.
Yeah, sure. So like in 2001, United States versus Microsoft, the Microsoft Corporation took a huge loss for incorporating their internet browser into their operating system, and that was considered a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. How is like Apple and Microsoft and Google getting away with bundling so much proprietary software that it basically functions as monopoly, but isn't falling under this Antitrust Act?
Scott Galloway has a really good book on this, and he said the reason that this is happening is because of how you come off. Bill Gates came off as an evil villain that was just like a wise ass anytime he was talking to regulators, whereas other companies, they come off as, these progressive thought leaders that want to move the world forward, and as a result of having a progressive cloak for themselves, they get far less vitriol from the antitrust people in the administration. Like, that only works, I imagine, to a degree, but Bill Gates came off, and Scott Galloway has studied this way more than I have. He's a really cool business professor at NYU, and I enjoy his books on this. But he just says that that Bill Gates came off as far more evil, so it was much easy to take him down a notch than it was the other companies.
Weird.
Why the fuck does my? Or go ahead.
It seems like Zuckerberg is considered like the tantamount, the most evil character we have like in popular culture, that's just like a normal human being.
Sure.
So I'd figure like, according to that model, he would have been just raked over the coals for stuff like this.
I mean, there's so many examples, even just with Google. You know, they created a partnership with YouBreak to work on their Pixel phones, and around the very same time period that they did that, they stopped allowing independent cell phone repair people to use Google AdWords for advertising. Like, there are so many examples, and I wish, like, you know, Scott Galloway has a bunch in his book, The Four, that you could just rattle off immediately. I could just talk about the ones that affect me, and like, I'm confident that if something like that happened with Microsoft in the late '90s, that there would have been a lot more action taken than there is now. I think another big part of it is that many of these companies, their model, there's a lot of monopolization and bundling of services, but they're giving away a lot of stuff for free. You know, like with Microsoft, it's buy our operating system, buy the license. With Google, it's like they're giving you so much away for free that it kind of it obfuscates the tie-in and the abuse later on.
Or even for Microsoft, they've switched to kind of those free models too, right? Like I think I could be wrong, but I think if you bought Windows like XP, I think you've gotten free upgrades for your OS for like the past decade, haven't you? Like doesn't 7 upgrade to 8 or 9 or 10 for free generally? Or did they stop doing that? Was that only from like 7 to 8 or something, or from like 8 to 10?
I think they're still doing it.
Yeah, because I think even Microsoft stops because again, like it's the software as a service model. I was gonna ask
the big
earlier.
cheat is to buy a Windows 8 license because it's hella cheap.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna ask earlier, like, how the fuck is it the fact that like when I go to download Chrome, my fucking Bing browser is like warning me, and then like I'm getting an OS thing popping up saying like, hey, like, are you sure you don't want to change these settings? Like, what the fuck? Like, bro, you're just my operating system. I don't need you like fucking, you know, babysitting my choice of web browser. It's fucking insane. I don't know.
I think there's also been a fundamental shift in like our viewpoint as a society on how we view these things. I think you could probably make the argument that back when all that was litigating with Microsoft, there's probably a different outlook. This is kind of like a new era of computing. We're like on the edge of a lot of the stuff, and now it's become very normalized with like the Apples of the world and stuff just kind of doing this. People are kind of complacent. Just, yeah, it kind of makes sense that every manufacturer is going to have their own ecosystem, going to have their own solutions, and yeah, fuck it, whatever. I don't care enough to really make a big stink about it.
Do you think a lot of this is driven by mostly consumer demand, or is it just corporate machinations and advertising and marketing?
Is that addressed
Lewis.
to me? Oh,
Yeah.
I assume Lewis is like the expert here on this.
I'm sorry, I zoned out for a second. My cat was jumping around the room.
Which cat?
Oreo.
Okay. So do you think this monopolization is largely just something driven by consumer demand, or is it driven by mostly corporate pushing?
I think it's consumers embracing the freemium model without asking why, or you know, what the price of it is. When it comes, at least to the consumer stuff, like, you know, with cases like Google.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah, I think that's a big issue that a lot of people need to confront head on more. Is that like consumers are choosing this? Like I get so upset when I hear platitudes of like, oh, we care about our privacy. It's like, no, you don't fucking care about your privacy. You want free shit. Like that's why you guys like give all your information to Facebook. Google. Like, fuck, I want free shit. But yeah, I think there has to be a recognition first that like, and like that one guy was saying, there is value added to some of these ecosystems. I'm not going to deny that. I like the Google ecosystem, but there's like a huge cost associated with it as well. And it seems like nobody on either side wants to recognize like the full spectrum of like there's upsides and downsides to the way that we do a lot of these businesses now.
all right. Well, I'm good. I'm gonna go. Big fan, Louis Rossmann. My favorite real estate YouTuber. Later.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for having me on. I guess that's.
Yeah.
I don't have any more thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, stay safe, buddy. Wait.
Oh.
Am I going to see you in Austin?
Oh, when are you coming?
I think middle of next month-ish.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay. Well, I'll see you then. We'll hang out, I'm sure.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.